Carol, can you believe what my daughter wrote on Facebook?
You told me, gosh, tell our listeners.
Okay. Hey, people, at the risk of sounding like my mother, remember in Oklahoma, the last freeze of the season is typically mid-April. Don't fall for the temptation at nurseries and Lowe's. Plants have to do their taxes, so wait until April 15th to start planting stuff that isn't freeze hardy. That's from Megan Seacrest, my daughter. I don't know whether to be, I don't know if it's good or bad. I mean, don't sound like my mother. It kind of made me laugh.
That is good.
You better give them advice for Indiana.
The advice for Indiana is Carol usually rates almost to race day, which is Memorial Day weekend, but that is way too late for most people. I'd say get through Mother's Day before you plan to put out stuff that could not survive a freeze, and you'll probably be okay. And I have seen tomato plants at the hardware store. Just ignore them.
Yeah, don't buy them yet. They're like fool's gold.
Exactly. So there we go. Are you ready to actually start the podcast now?
Yeah, let's start the podcast.
All right. Welcome to the Gardenangelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on several acres out in the country.
We call ourselves Gardenangelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, Dee. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those episodes.
Kind of crazy, right?
Oh, we're kind of crazy. Want to hear about my garden this past week?
Oh my gosh, yes.
So I did get my tomato and pepper seeds sown inside. Plus, I found a packet of sensitive plant seeds, and I thought I'll sow some of those. Little kids will like them. And our good friends at All America Selections, National Garden Bureau, sent us seeds, and they included some begonias. And I thought, well, I've never grown begonias from seed. So I've sowed some of those as well. We'll see how they do.
I love that. It looks like you also dug out the compost.
I am still digging out the compost. The first bin I've emptied it. And then the stuff that's not decomposed is all being piled back into that. And then I'm digging out the other one. So it takes a little bit, and I don't try to rush or anything because I'm not working myself out to exhaustion. But guess what happened on Sunday afternoon?
I don't know. Tell me.
I was watering the violas on the back patio, and I saw this little cute bunny hop out. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then here comes another little bunny, hop, hop, hop. And I think, I see where their warren is, right by the honey locust tree, 10 feet from the patio. Mama put her little warren. And I don't know how many are in there. And, I could have just taken care of it, so to speak, but I'm too much of a softie. I left it.
I found them sometimes in the middle of my garden out by the street. I let them live too. I think I'm a big softie too.
You are a softie, Dee. Tell us about your garden this past week.
So I worked really hard on Friday and Saturday. Really hard. So hard that yesterday after Mass, I just came home and sat on the couch like a big old, slug. I planted some of the roses I bought this spring. They were in pots and they weren't doing too well. And I really think it's because of the potting soil I used. I think it holds too much water, but that's another day. Anyway, I weeded and planted out the nasturtiums that I started indoors. I decided to start nasturtiums indoors this year and calendula because I need them to get bigger before they go out into the garden so they succeed and do really well. And they're doing great. I put a video on Instagram this morning that talks about that. We are recording this on Monday. So on Wednesday, that's 2 days old. Calendula, pot marigolds coming out next. I thinned the lettuce, the radishes, the bok choy, and the greenhouse is going strong. And it is so full that I moved some of my geraniums and pelargoniums into the house. And when I say geraniums, I mean pelargoniums because the other geraniums would just live in the garden because they're perennial. It's always a race. So somebody wanted me to talk a bit about the greenhouse. I'll just quickly talk about it. So in the greenhouse, I do cuttings in the fall. I overwinter those cuttings until spring. And then everything, as soon as the light gets, taller, longer, then everything starts to grow really fast. And then you have to chop everything back because it's getting ready to just burst. And that's where we're at right now. And so I like to start seeds in the greenhouse. Also have a seed starting station, but it's down in the basement. So that'd be a lot to go down and do basement and then greenhouse and then a garden. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I have a race to get everything sown in the greenhouse in April and March, and then also get stuff in. And then in the middle of April, or probably the third week of April, it's going to get really warm. And if it gets really warm, everything gets too hot in the greenhouse, even with a fan. So it's this race of get everything out of the greenhouse. So right now, pelargoniums are inside. They're going to go on their stage on the north side of the outside of the house as soon as the weather calms down. But in the meantime, it's just run.
It is run. And I was at Menards the other day, and there was a woman behind me, and she had a couple of grasses, and she had another plant, a broom that I had never grown. I'm not sure if it's hardy in Indiana, but she said last year I was way too late and everything was gone. So this year I'm buying it all and I'm sticking it in the garage until time to plant. And I wanted to say, well, look at the tag. And if it's a shrub and it's hardy, you can plant it now.
Yeah.
You don't need to keep it in the garage until, things are frost free. The shrubs and hardy stuff you can plant. So I didn't have time to say, I know what I'm doing, lady. Let me look at your plants and give you some real advice. I just bought my stuff and left.
Yeah, sometimes you just want to shop, but I always end up talking to people, and then they always kind of look askance at me, and I'm like, no, really, I know what I'm doing. I do this for a living. But something you said made me think. So here, perennials are in two stages. So there are perennials that haven't really started growing yet.
Yep.
Which is great. If you can find those that are still semi-dormant, plant those babies out. Then there are other perennials, like I was thinking about the salvia we saw at Brick's Garden on Sunday when I was with Karen. It was already full grown and it had all that great soft greenhouse growth on top of it. That might get nipped back. So I told Karen, I said, just bring it inside, and keep it inside for a little bit where it's protected. And then I said, as soon as, nights get into after 45, you're fine. But you got to be really careful about that with the things that have been grown in the greenhouse. That soft growth will get nipped.
Yeah, that soft growth is what you really got to watch. Plants like that also need to be hardened off. If they've been grown all cushy, they're not going to like it that first cold night. But if they've been grown outside and they're starting to break dormancy and stuff, go ahead and plant them. They're used to it. They're tough.
Yeah, they are. And one way and so people get a little confused because here and even where you live, you use tropicals for summer color, and those can't go out yet. It needs to be 50 degrees before you really bring those out because they just get set back so bad. So we cleaned out my pots on Saturday and on my deck, and we're just waiting. And some of my perennials overwintered in my pots. So we just worked around those and we're going to keep them.
That's a great idea. So I'm going to do the first quote. And we're going to dive into our flower topic. Ready?
Cool.
Surely the flowers of 100 springs are simply the souls of beautiful things. The poppies aflame with gold and red were the kisses of lovers in days that are fled. And that is Lucy Maud Montgomery. And it's part of a poem called Fancies, which you found that quote. That's interesting.
I did. And Lucy Maud Montgomery, I'm almost sure, wrote the Betsy Tacy books, which my daughters read when they were little girls. They're old books, but she's a really good writer. And that series is very sweet.
So National Garden Bureau has declared that 2023 is the year of the gladiolus.
Yeah, glads. Glads are easy to grow.
Yes, they are.
Now, big ones, you have to stake them. But there are some varieties you don't have to stake, especially if you grow them in with other things that help support them. And on Gardener's World, I watched it this morning. On Gardener's World, Monty was talking about other plants that do that, where plants come up and kind of support another plant you have. And I think with short glads, that would definitely work with daylilies or hostas or whatever. So
sure.
So I want to know about this Mon Amour. That is the prettiest glad I've ever seen in my life.
So I went to the National Garden Bureau's website to find out more about glads, even though like I know the basic, it's the corm, you plant it in the spring, and most of them will just live over in the ground. But around Indiana, some of them you need to dig them back up in the fall.
Not here.
So right there on the left-hand side, smacked me upside the head was that Mon Amour from Brent and Becky's Bulbs. And that's the prettiest glad I've ever seen. It's like a painting. So I flipped over to their site and it's sold out.
Of course it is. It's beautiful. And so we're going to link to it in our show notes so you guys can see it. It's shades of pink and light yellow and white. It's the prettiest thing I've seen. It looks like a Monet painting.
But glads, yes, glads are one of those things that if you are not selective or judicious, you can end up with a whole bunch of glads and be very confused, kind of like daylilies and roses. There's so many. So we thought a way to focus your glad buying was to go to a place where they have the heirloom bulbs, and that would be Old House Gardens.
Yes, I love that. I love that website. And I bought some iris from them recently, and I have bought glads from them, including Atomic, which is also called Atom. And it's a gorgeous fiery red, but I'm telling you, it is pure red with white edge.
Now, it's a little bit of an affront to you and I that some of the glads that they talk about as heirlooms are from 1976, which clearly is a year that we both remember. That was the bicentennial year. And it's like, well, how could a glad from 1976 that we remember that year, how could that be heirloom? That's like going into the antique store and there's like your toys that you used to play with. And they're like, oh, look, antique toys. And you're like, that's not an antique. That's my toy.
I think, Carol, that may say more about us than the glads, but yeah. So a lot of the glads that are in that list are really, they're simpler looking because so some people don't like glads because they think of them as funeral flowers. My mom hated them.
Yeah.
Because they use them a lot in vertical bouquets because it makes sense, right?
Yep.
But there are lots of delicate glads, like the Atom is delicate, not delicate color, but delicate in size. It does not have to be staked. Another one that does not have to be staked that I adore is gladiolus byzantinus, Byzantine glads. They are hot pink or fuchsia. And boy, they look good in the garden and they don't get real tall. And if you put them next to daylilies, the daylilies support them and they don't have to be, nothing has to be done with them. I should post a picture of them.
You should. And I'm looking at the National Garden Bureau's website and they have a variety called Volcano with a Vulcano with the genus name of gladiolus nanus, and nanus usually means it's smaller. And it says that has a brilliant fuchsia pink flower. You might like that one, Dee. Go find it.
Yeah, I tend to like more delicate things because they don't take over your garden. You know what I mean?
I do.
And that, yeah, in some things, especially bulbs.
I have a white gladiolus that somehow got planted in my perennial border that I call Plopper's Field. I just plop stuff in there. And we used to have to dig them in the fall when I was a kid, but this one just comes up every year and there's one white bloom. I'm like, there you are.
It's like an old friend that comes back to visit.
Yeah.
There are also very short glads. They won't work in Carol's climate, but they will work here, although they don't always.
Boo.
I'm sorry. They don't always overwinter here either. And that's the Abyssinian glads. They are very short and sweet and they have a real pretty eye and they're white on the edges. I've grown them a couple of times, but since they aren't reliably hardy even here, I just am not in the mood for stuff that I have to work hard to plant that's not reliably hardy anymore.
That is true. And so on the National Garden Bureau's website, they have the grandifloras, which are the great big hybrids.
Yes.
And then they have the dwarf grandiflorus. And then they have the gladiolus nanus hybrids, which are the ones that are shorter.
Yes.
And then they have the Byzantine. And then they have something called Dalinii hybrids. And then a couple of others. I mean, you really could get lost in glads if you didn't have a map.
Almost like begonias.
Almost.
which we talked about last week. So yeah, you could get lost. I think anytime you work with a flower genus, you can get lost because there's just so many different varieties.
Oh, yeah.
Wait until we talk about salvia again.
Yeah, let's not
It's a
talk about
nightmare.
getting lost in a genus because that I have to say the V word. I'm not going to yet.
So do you think that's enough on glads?
I do think it's enough. And I think the other thing too is if you just want a beautiful cut flower, row up some glads in your vegetable garden in a spare spot and just grow them and pluck them and enjoy them.
Yeah, just enjoy them. Enjoy anything you grow.
That's right. Now you can do a quote, Dee.
Okay. She turned to the sunlight, shook her yellow head, and whispered to her neighbor, "Winter is dead." That's by A.A. Milne, and loved it. I just loved it.
I don't know what book it's in or who she is.
I'm going to say she's a daffodil.
You know what? I think you're right.
I don't know, but I mean, that just sounds like a daffodil shaking that yellow head. So for our veggie topic, we decided to go off topic a little bit and talk about our favorite tools because listener Francine asked more info about our favorite tools. And you'll be surprised to see that some of them we both like, and others we don't. And I would love to hear about Carol.
Well, before we do, let me say we picked this topic. And then when I was listening to Gardener's World's episode 4, Monty Don was planting potatoes and he used a mattock to dig a trench. And he says, It's brilliant for drawing soil back. And then he says, obviously, I could have used a spade just as well, but it's always fun to use a specialty tool.
Yes, I loved that quote. I almost wrote it down too, because here he is with that giant mattock and he's and you know what? And I love how he stands on 2x4s in his vegetable garden, because it also spaces out his rows, but then he doesn't compress the soil so badly.
Yes.
It gives him a firm place to stand. And so he was just really putting his back into that with the mattock, and he plopped those potatoes in there and they were done.
So you want me to go through my tool list?
Yeah, you go through yours first, because I talked a lot the last time.
So you do know that I claim to have the world's largest hoe collection.
Yes, I know. And actually, you should post that again to your Instagram. It's been a long time since you posted it.
It has been a long time. And I don't really have any hoes on my list.
Because you don't really use hoes, because your garden is not, it's like where you would use a hoe, it's in raised beds, right?
Right. So I've hand hose.
Yeah, me too.
But in no particular order, I love the Hori Hori knife or the gardening knife. I do all kinds of stuff with it. And Dee, I know when I was writing that down, you said, I don't like gardening knives.
I don't like the Hori Hori knife. I've tried it. They irritate me, but it's just a personal thing.
I do like it. It's great for digging little holes. It's great for digging out dandelions. I also love the Cobra Head mini cultivator, which is a little bit smaller. It's got that little hook, great for weeding, just pulling a little row for radish seedlings.
The Cobra Head is really great for getting Bermuda grass out of your garden.
Cool. There's something called a Cape Cod weeder, which is like a little hook thing that's great for just like light cultivation and light weeding. I have some Corona mini loppers that I'm always grabbing when I need something a little bit bigger than hand shears. Got the Jacati shears. You're going to talk about those some more. I have a very fancy stainless steel trowel that, hand forged in England or the Netherlands or somewhere.
But I want to hear about this fancy stainless steel trowel.
It's a Sneebor brand.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe it's a DeWitt. It's either DeWitt or Sneebor.
Yeah.
But they're hand forged. You cannot wreck this thing.
Right.
And then I have a perennial spade, which I love, 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 love. Actually used it a little bit today.
Explain what a perennial spade is.
A perennial spade it's got a little bit bigger head than a trowel and a little bit longer handle that kind of ends in a T. And so I tell people, if you can still get on your knees or whatever, it's great for digging. And I can dig a hole pretty fast with that, even compared to a shovel. Of course, I love my lawnmower and my wheelbarrow and my truck and my fancy Duluth Trading Company pants that you can't buy anymore. Most expensive pair of pants I own, and they're gardening pants, Dee.
I'm not surprised somehow.
And then my handmade compost sieve that fits on top of my wheelbarrow. I've been using that the couple of days. And then my specialty tool is my rockery trowel. That's a very, very narrow trowel that I use for planting bulbs in the lawn in the fall.
Yeah, I have one too. And boy, they are sharp. One time I cut myself with it.
Yeah, you should be wearing a good pair of gloves when you wear that.
Yeah, you do, because the sides of that trowel are really, really sharp. And I was trying to get the plug of soil out of the trowel. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
so
I
good.
cut myself pretty good. So yes, they're wonderful, especially for crocus.
Yes. Now you got a tool list.
I do. And it's kind of long. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I've got my seatbelt fastened. I'm ready to go.
Okay. So my favorite tool of all my tools is my Dutch hand hoe, which is a triangular shaped hand hoe. And it's got a longer, it's like an isosceles triangle. That's the best way I know to explain it. I have two of them and I ruined one. And so I glue the handle back on every spring because I need them both. And it's really sharp, especially when you get a new one. And I usually sharpen mine on a grinder we have to keep it sharp because, I have to cut those weeds. And then, so the old one, let me just say real quickly, the old one digs out weeds by the root because it's not as sharp now. And the newer one is sharp. So I have two. I have a cheap trowel that is exactly the size of a 4-inch pot and is sharp on the end and it's made of steel. It is not hand forged. I also have the DeWitt hand forged and I have Sneeboard trowels too. And I even have a trowel that is a Dutch trowel, which you don't scoop, you pull back the soil. It's a different style. In fact, if you watch Gardener's World, Monty Don has them on the back when he's doing seeding, sowing seeds, they're behind his head. So that's what they look like. I really like sharp trowels because our soil can be compacted and even, I hate aluminum trowels. And for years, I wrote for Fiskars and I love Fiskars tools like loppers and a lot of their other tools, but I hate their trowels because they're made of aluminum. And I used to have to write about them. It was kind of hard. They don't move very well through the soil because they're too thick and I don't know why, but they don't cut through it. So my new love is my long-handled trowel, which is almost the same thing as your spade, I think. Your perennial spade.
I'm going to go look and tell you.
You can look at it and tell me if it's similar.
Nope.
It's not. Interesting. Okay, well, it's a long-handled trowel, and mine does not have the T grip on the top. It actually is a D, like a shovel does, a D handle. The one I linked to does not have a handle, but same idea. You can get down on your knees or sit down on the ground and dig a hole for a rose bush to plant, which is a pretty big hole. I already mentioned Fiskars loppers, small and large. I like small loppers, like your Corona small loppers, to get down in between when I'm cutting all the dead wood out of my roses in spring. Okay. And then the big loppers are for big things, obviously. And then I love the Comfort Gel Corona micro snips. They're wonderful. And I don't like their bypass hand pruners. And I like the Felco bypass hand pruners. And I also like the Giacatti sheep shears, but I want you to talk about the Giacatti sheep shears because my list is really long.
So the Giacatti sheep shears, found out about these through Nan Andra, who posted about them, and her brother was selling them. And I found out they were actually originally used for shearing llamas.
Which she has llamas.
And yeah, they're sort of self-sharpening, but they've got a longer blade. It's like scissors. Yeah, 6-inch blade, maybe.
Maybe 8-inch. They're really long.
They are. And they're good if you just need to trim up like grasses and things. They'll just we're going to just grab a hunk of something and trim those babies off. That's how I use mine. And they are wonderful.
They are wonderful. They rust because they're not stainless steel. They're forged steel or something. I don't know, but they rust. So you have to be really careful with them. And I actually bring them indoors, not in the garage, because I have a big bucket that I keep all my tools in and whichever tools I'm going to be using at the time. And we also didn't mention, what are those called? The great big scissors, the big scissors that you do great big grasses with. They have big, long, I can't think of what they're called, but big shears. They're great big shears and you do them with two hands. And the Fiskars ones are really, really good. So the Jacquati shears are in between those big scissors, whatever they're called, and small clippers like the Corona clippers. And so they each do different jobs. I like the Jacquati sheep shears when I get them really, really sharp, because you can trim back a whole spirea with those, in the spring. They're good stuff. They are pricey, but good. And then maybe next week we should talk about power tools, the power tools we like. I know you mentioned them. Next week we'll talk about power tools, because that's another whole thing. And boy, there are some good ones out there now.
So I left a link to the perennial spade, and I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put a better link. But I go to Garden Tool Company, which is out of Texas, and they import these tools and sell them.
I love them.
And that's where I bought. I mean, I have so many hand tools and so many hoes, and
me too.
It's just ridiculous how many tools are around here. But as Monty said, sometimes it's fun to use a specialty tool.
Well, and he's right. He's right about that. It is much, and I'm looking at it right now. And yes, it is different from mine, but I can see the appeal. And I love that company, and I buy from them all the time. Garden Tool Company.
So the way to judge your love of the tool is, if you broke it, would you rebuy it? And the answer on the perennial spade is absolutely. The minute it broke, but it's not going to break. These are so indestructible.
Yeah, it's really hard to break them, and they just get better and better with more use. And we didn't even bring up garden forks. I didn't even think about it until just now. The garden fork is fabulous when you're putting in a new bed, because it'll just loosen up that soil and get the Bermuda grass out of there. So I have one of those too. And if it broke, I would buy another one in a New York Minute, along with the Dutch hand hoe. Those are...
I have the Dutch hand hoe, and I should have put it on my list, because I would rebuy it. I mean, if I want to remove a bunch of sod or something, I'll get on my hands and knees and remove it with that Dutch hand hoe. It's pretty easy.
It's sharp, sharp, sharp. And you can just really go to town and work on stuff. And it's really great for like asters that are out of control, or Rudbeckia goldsturm that's out of control, that has those roots. You can just lift them up and yank them out of there, which I will be doing tomorrow, because we had rain today. So
we have cloudy today. I think I don't know what I'll be able to do today. But sometimes watching Gardener's World, and you see in the background Monty's tools, or there's a couple of rakes he uses, and I'm like, I want that, but I can't find that. He's using old tools and stuff. And that just kind of annoys me when it's like Monty has it, Carol wants it, Carol can't find it.
Well, Carol will have to go to England, where they sell those tools, because they have better garden tools than we do. Although we're getting better and better. I mean, for a while there, we had cheap, crummy tools, and now there's enough gardeners in the world who want good tools. So we have good tools. And there's that company, I don't know if you can remember the name of it right off the cuff, but he makes beautiful forged tools. And I used it as in one of my gifts for gardeners articles I did for Oklahoma Gardening.
Isn't that Red Pig Tools?
Yes, Red Pig Tools.
Beautiful.
Those are good too. Beautiful tools.
I watched a documentary about him, and he makes them all by hand. And he actually likes to make special tools if there's somebody that has a particular physical limitation or whatever, and he can make them a better tool. He's all about that too. Those are good tools.
So we're going to link to him too, because he has some beautiful things, and I just looked him up, and I've bought from him many times. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Excellent. Well, we just scratched the surface of tools, Dee.
And we'll do the other ones next week that are, power tools.
There you go.
Because now power tools are awesome because they're battery operated.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to do another quote to take us into our next section. To acquire the habit of reading is to construct for yourself a refuge from almost all the miseries of life. W. Somerset Maugham. Maugham.
I think it's Maugham.
Maugham.
Yeah. Maugham. I loved this because Lord knows there's been plenty of misery on the news, and there's not much we can do about some of it, but we can sure get a book and go read, because us fretting about things does not make things go away.
No.
If only it did.
If only it did. And I track all my books I've read on Goodreads. My challenge to myself was to read 100 books this year, because I read like 108 last year. So I'm at like 39 right now. So it says I'm 17 books ahead.
Awesome.
Which is fine. So
I'm not even close. I'm not even close. But our book this week on the bookshelf is one that was sent to us, and it's Weed Free Gardening, and it's by Tasha Greer. And we like this book.
We do like this book. The subtitle is A Comprehensive and Organic Approach to Weed Management. And there are so many books, not so many, but every once in a while books come along and they have this promise of weed-free gardening. You know, that's the holy grail for every gardener, right? Is to not have any weeds. Well, you are going to have weeds. And so,
yes.
But she has methods and plans so that if you have like really bad stands of weeds or how to get them before they set seed, she's got information on soil, on the tools that you can use. And so that kind of ties in with our topic. We could have just talked about weed removal tools.
Yeah, we could have, maybe another day. The introduction is great. The opening line is the war on weeds, why it can't be won, and how to make peace in the garden.
Exactly.
And that's the truth. And when you're young, you just kill yourself trying to get all the weeds out. And then as you get older, you go, okay, I can't get them all. And by the way, that weed feeds the bees. So I'm okay with it. You understand what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I listened to another garden person over in England, and he talked about how, you know, having weeds up and around his flowers was just kind of part of his garden, and he just didn't get all shook up about it.
Well, and I hate to talk about Gardener's World again, but on the latest episode, there was a man who was blind. He certainly had weeds, but he managed to garden even though he was blind.
Yes.
And do it really, really well. And I thought that is a really productive garden. And because he can't see the weeds, he doesn't care about them. But by touch, he can tell what some weeds are and what his plants are. And I just remember thinking, you know what? He's not so bothered by them. I shouldn't be as bothered as I am.
That's true. And so the author, Tasha Greer, she's kind of the real deal because she's got 10 acres of a homestead out there in Surrey County, North Carolina.
Which is zone 7, I bet.
And yes. And so, but she raises goats, chickens, ducks, worms, etc. So lots of good composting material in that.
Yeah, no kidding. And also lots of good creatures to eat weeds.
Like goats and chickens.
So that she probably uses both.
Well, I won't be able to use goats and chickens, but I will be able to use some of the other things she talks about. And they're just good reminders, even if you have a lot of gardening experience like you and I do, that if you let a weed set seed, shame on you. You know, if you keep pulling the same weed over and over, you got to figure out how to short circuit its life cycle. Just keep, you know, whacking until it wears out.
Yeah, like taproots.
Yes.
And I think also looking at weeds in different ways, like the fact that dandelions are carbon fixers, which is dandelions also bring up other nutrients up to the top of the soil for other plants. Plus, they're a great pollen source for honeybees. That all helps me as I walk through my lawn and see dandelions. And I know that people say dandelions really don't feed the bees. They're not a high nectar source, but in the early spring, they are a high pollen source. Just FYI.
There you go. And she's got information about different tools that she uses for weeding. So this is actually, I'm going to enjoy going through this a bit more.
I am too, because I barely scratched the surface on it. I just didn't have time. I love that each little section has a toolbar.
Uh-huh.
And the toolbar, and one of the toolbars is the flame weeder. And I actually use a propane flame weeder in my paths.
I'd love to. I think that would be so fun.
It is fun. You just go out there for a day and and I've said this before, my nephew, he used to come over and watch our house for us when we'd go out of town. And he said he would just get a beer and the flame weeder and walk through my paths, which I really appreciated.
So my one path that I have through the garden bed, I've put it wood shavings from my brother-in-law's woodworking shop. I would not use a flame weeder on that path.
No, that would not be a good idea. No, my paths are gravel, I should explain. So I would not, and I also have brick paths, but I would not use them on, no, a wood path would be bad. And I like that she talks about rain gardens in here, about organic matter, just all the things that we've talked about in other books, swales, mounds, hugel culture, compost, all of these methods that we can use that makes it easier to keep control of some weeds. Like I put down 2 inches of mulch and just good old wood mulch from some trees that we had to chop down.
Yeah. So this book comes out on April the 12th. So people will have to pre-order it after they listen to our podcast episode, if they listen to it before April 12th. And it is from our friends at Cool Springs Press. And that is The Weed-Free Gardening, a comprehensive and organic approach to weed management by Tasha Greer. Well done, Tasha.
Yes, well done, Tasha. This is a very educational book.
Yes, and well needed.
Ready for the next quote?
You go for it.
What does a flower therapist ask her patients? Are you feeling bouquet? That leads us into our next section, which is the dirt. And it's about flower puns, which you found, which is Punpedia. And it's from our friend Katie Elzer Peters. You should explain.
So Katie Elzer Peters is our friend. She does our websites for us and has a great business called The Garden of Words. She has a great newsletter, and she just had a link to, a fun link, flower puns. And so that's our fun link. But I actually wanted to give a shout out to another business, a mom and pop business over in Ohio called Groovy Plants Ranch.
I think you talked about them last year, maybe. Yeah,
I did. They came across my radar again because I saw where they have purchased the adjoining 11 acres and are expanding. And this is a younger couple. I think their kids are toddlers, and they just love plants. It's Jared and Liz Hughes, and they just love growing plants. And they have some of the best, most unusual plants. They have tons of house plants. They ship to all 50 states. And I watched a video of how they pack stuff. And I'm like, Dee, you can go to their website, but please go with caution, as there is a lot of interesting stuff they have for sale.
There is. They ship plants. I like how you put that in our notes. Warning, warning. They ship plants.
Right. Now, they also, if you want to visit, it's a full service garden center, I'd say. And, they often have musicians there playing bluegrass type music or something. And they sell all the usual plants for people in the area. It's just north of Columbus, Ohio. So it's about a 4-hour drive for me. I don't think I'll make the trip, but I'm going to keep watching their website, because if something unusual comes up, I'm going to be tempted.
It looks like a lot of fun. And I love their Instagram. I just looked at it, and I love any Instagram that has a Volkswagen bus on it.
Oh yeah. They've got a painted Volkswagen bus. It's a showpiece, and it's really good. And they had to move it apparently for their expansion. It's like more parking. They're clearing out this barn so they can do more classes, more greenhouses, and like more. And I'm like, this place it really is groovy.
It is awesome. And they even sell orchids. So they sell all kinds of things, and they look like they have a lot of fun doing it, and they do videos. So that's all cool.
And they ship. So we'll leave a link for our listeners in case they are tempted. Yeah. They have a full shipping staff, they said.
There you go. I need to stay away. For sure.
But they ship, Dee. They'll ship to Oklahoma.
Oh, I'm sure they will. How about our rabbit holes?
Well, you have a tool rabbit hole you went down.
Yeah, I decided to get a second pair of Felco pruners, and I won't go into why, but it's not worth repeating. It was some carelessness on my part, but I decided to buy some new ones. And then mine are so old that I had forgotten that there's like 11 different styles.
Oh, yeah.
So I was sitting in the restaurant having brunch yesterday, trying to look through the styles on my phone going, I just want a pair of Felco pruners. And there's Felco pruners for small hands. There's Felco pruners that are the traditional ones. There's ones that switch the top around. Basically is a giant rabbit hole, but I ended up choosing number 5, which is the standard ones. I've also had the ones for small hands. I have a better rabbit hole next week, and that's a tease. And Carol, tell us what Felco pruners.
Well, first of all, I want to know, did you get the holster to go with your Felco pruners?
I did not, because I don't wear a belt when I'm out in the garden.
No. They have a clip-on holster that I clip onto the pocket of my jeans. And it's like, I have to have that. And then you don't like get a hole in your jeans. You just get a spot on your jeans where that holster is all the time.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm not going to wear them as a holster. I don't think.
You need the holster, Dee.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll buy it, Carol.
Maybe you should. I'm telling you.
Tell me which Felcos you have.
I have number 8s.
And what are number 8s? Do you even know?
Huh?
Do you want me to look up number 8s? What are number 8s?
I don't know. I just looked right before this. I thought, oh, Dee's got number 5s. I think I have number 2s. And then I looked, I'm like, no, these are number 8s. And it is my second pair of number 8s.
These are for heavy duty.
Yeah.
I should have probably gotten those, but aren't they heavier?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't picked up all the other ones to know the difference.
Right. We usually have to order them. You can't find them anywhere locally usually. So
you can go to a high-end garden center. High-end garden centers might have them.
My high-end garden center does not have them. We don't have very many garden centers in Oklahoma City. Anyway, Felcos, bought some Felcos. Tell us about your rabbit hole.
So, of course, I have the real rabbit hole out in the garden. But the other day, my cousin sends me this note, an older cousin. He's got a bunch of family archives. He says, I have our grandmother's high school assignment that I think you might be interested in. And she confirmed my address. I'm like, yeah, same place you sent the Christmas card to. So like 2 days later, the box arrives. And this is a 144-page assignment she did in high school where she did sort of a botany plant study. And it's got all these.
She did a 144-page project in high school?
In 1908 and 1909.
Oh my goodness. Keep going.
And so I opened it up and it's like little drawings she did for like a botany study from mosses and leaves and all kinds of stuff. And a few pages that she wrote and a few experiments that she did.
Uh-huh.
And then it's got this statement in it that says, from this lady named Edna F. McCormick, verifying that this was done at Shortridge High School, 1908 to 1909. And so I went down a rabbit hole to figure out who she was. And I found out that she lived in a boarding house in the 1910 census. And she was listed as a botanist on a state website. What? As a state botanist.
That's awesome.
Not a state document. There was no websites.
Huh.
So I go down a rabbit hole. It's like, well, I'm going to scan this and share it with all my cousins. So I had to figure out how to do that without like one at a time through my printer scanner. And I figured out, I put my iPhone on a stand. I used the Adobe Scan program, and it actually finds the four corners of the document because I put it on a piece of white poster board. And then it's just like, put it on, click, put it on, click, put it on, click. And I made a PDF for everybody.
Oh, that
was my rabbit hole.
That's a great rabbit hole. Way better than mine.
And guess what, Dee?
What?
She had a page on Violaceae.
Well, I'm not really surprised by that, but that's cool. And you missed telling what grade she made.
Oh, she got an A.
Well, no kidding.
1909, though. Just think how old that thing is.
It's really old. And the fact that she did a 144-page project in high school, gosh, if I still had teenagers, I'd be like, you guys have it easy.
Yeah, I just remember she did this whole plant thing. She would have had to go to the library. They didn't have the internet to look all this stuff up. She'd had to go to the library and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That is cool.
So garden commissions, you want to hear mine?
I do. I hope you're going to be very busy because I feel like you've been slacking off, Dee.
Really?
I'm kidding. You've been working hard.
I've been working really hard. I'm still feeding the roses. I'm almost done. I think I only have, like 6 left. That's pretty good because I have a lot of roses now. And then I've got to go and cut back. There's a section of the garden that's up against the house on the top tier. And I've got to cut all that back. The grass is in there and stuff. And then I've got to plant another rose bush. And I also need to cut back. Oh, these 3-tiered gardens that were outside the kitchen. I did them. I went through them once, but they really need to be gone through and I need to mulch them. So there'll be that. And then I already talked about the hardy perennials with soft growth from the greenhouse. So I don't have to say that. We're going to get down in the mid 30s, 37, 36 in the next couple of days. So we need to keep watching the weather.
We definitely need to keep watching the weather. And Dee, I think next week, I want you to tell people how you are feeding the roses so people understand why it's taking you so long to do it.
It seems like it's taken forever, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll tell people how I feed the roses.
Okay.
It's a pain in the neck, and I'm also going to tell, if I remember, I'm also going to tell how Chris Van Cleve does his roses throughout the growing season, because he just posted about how he feeds them, and he's a better rosarian than I am. What are you going to do?
So I'm going to plant out my onion sets this week, dig out the rest of the compost, finish that thing off, and just start cutting back. I need to get this garden into shape because the world's greatest family Easter egg hunt is taking place on Easter weekend with 6 children hunting. And so I got to get that all shaped up, remove tripping hazards and things like that to the best of my ability, or just say, hey, kids, don't go in the vegetable garden. That's a tripping hazard. And there's all that stone back there. And I don't want to be the one that gets your forehead bashed on the rock.
Right.
So, and then I don't want you to get really excited, Dee, but the grass is starting to grow. And I don't know if maybe at least the front I might mow next week. The back's going to wait. I usually like to wait until after the egg hunt for a couple of reasons. One, nobody wants to get grass clippings all over their Easter shoes. And those flowers are still blooming in the lawn. So I like to let it grow as long as I dare before I cut back there. Mm-hmm. So that's it. That's my week.
Explain why you let the lawn grow long before you cut it back, because you have bulbs in it. Explain why.
Well, I want the foliage to ripen, quote unquote, to grow as much as possible. Since it's feeding those bulbs for next year. And so I really go pretty long.
Yeah. In my garden beds, I have daffodils, and daffodil foliage is kind of unsightly when it starts to go poop over, but you really, really need to let it go as long as you can let it, because that's what feeds your bulbs. And if you don't do that, you have a lot fewer flowers the next year.
That's right. And so I wanted to ask you, is poop over, is that a botanical term?
I think so. I mean, they do. They look poop.
I think we'll end on that note. We want to thank you for listening to The Gardenangelist. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us. Also hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything.
And if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review that helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your gardening friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
Yes, and be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites. And if you use the affiliate links, if you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you nothing. And I should note, we have switched our book links to bookshop.org, which is the alternative to Amazon. It supports independent bookstores, and it's much easier to get affiliate links from them. And as always, we have an affiliate link to botanical interest seeds that you can use at any time.
Yes, and that really does help us because it costs money to produce this podcast. It was lovely to chat with you over the garden gate today. Bye until next week.
Happy gardening, everybody. Bye.